Okay. I guess that concludes the lecture. I'd like to thank the panel for participating, taking time out of your schedule to participate. And I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Again, let's give them a hand, please. I'd also like to say that the organization that we're with, if anyone's interested, you can participate. When this issue hit in December 2008 and January 2009, we kept in regular contact with the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Now, some of the letters, the emails that he sent us, of course, had confidential on it. But it was very interesting how some of the things he did say was maximum restraint insofar as bombing. And then I saw something on the news about the UN headquarters getting bombed and some other things. But we also do a lot of other things. This is our primary issue until we get some kind of peace process going. IHRC is a chapter of the Global Human Rights Organization. We're spread out throughout the world, and we have people on location at these incidents, these areas when these incidents take place, so we get intelligence from both sides. In fact, during the conflict, we had people in Israel and in Gaza that were getting regular information to us. We work in coordination with Amnesty International, the International Solidarity Movement, SOA Watch, and several other organizations. And some of the things we've done is we've started an inner-city youth boxing program here. We've helped get political asylum for a religious persecuted graduate student. We helped pass in one house the McGovern-Sestak Bishop Amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. I think it was 2006. We helped pass that. And it didn't get passed in the other house under 10 votes, but it was worth a try. And we do a lot of other things, but we work with politicians and corporations. So if you're interested, you can talk to the current president, Viola Simpson here. She doesn't like attention, but she's going to be taking the role of the organization and continuing to carry the torch.
Speaking of right now, hold on. I know it's about 8 o'clock and a lot of you are tired and have had a long day, and before Ty rambles on like he likes to do, some people have some questions for the professors, and so I'd like to ask the professors if they have time.
Sure. Yes.
If you'd be willing to. If anybody has some questions, I'm going to cut Ty off now. If anybody has some questions that you'd like to ask, okay.
I have a question. I don't know who I should direct this to, but anyone I guess that knows. How does Hamas benefit like Palestinians on a smaller scale, such as their local economy or daily life, not just in the big picture of Palestinian rights and for the Palestinian land?
Hamas works the way a lot of Islamic fundamentalist organizations work, which is that they start in the social sector. Right? In other words, they start by providing food to families. They start by providing daycare. They start by providing schools on the ground, and this has been a standard way in which Islamic fundamentalist groups have worked. Right? Now, what happened? A little more background on Hamas. Hamas rose during the first Palestinian Intifada, starts December 1987. Okay. They rose as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They saw themselves as providing social services on the ground and resisting Israel. Okay? During the first Intifada, Israel wanted to split the Palestinian people. Right? They saw that this first uprising as a product of the PLO, which is only partially actually a correct analysis. Israel and Israeli generals later admitted this, tacitly supported Hamas in order to provide a counterweight to the secular group. So Hamas gained some of its initial strength through Israeli support. After that, what happened was that they began to gain power mostly in the Gaza Strip, less so in the West Bank. Okay? Gaza Strip tends to be more religious. Okay? Their strength was such that in June of 2007, they won. They took. 2006. They won elections. 2007. They took over the Gaza Strip in a fight with the mainstream. At this point, would be the mainstream group from the PLO called the Fatah. Okay? There are a number of analyses about why this happened. Why is it that not that they took over militarily, but that they got elected before they took over military in the Gaza Strip? And one of the key elements in this is that the Palestinian elected leadership was notoriously notoriously corrupt. So this part of the vote for Hamas was a vote against the Palestinian alleged leadership. Okay? Hamas, Peter quoted me, I'm saying Hamas is a terrorist organization. Often that word terrorist actually shuts down inquiry, right, rather than opening it up, right? So what Hamas has done is they provided some services, right, engaged in some violent resistance against Israel. They didn't for those 6 months. One thing we should note that during this period that I have called the ceasefire, right, the number of rocket shots into Israel for those 6 months went down 98%. So it was a significant drop in that. There weren't that there were no rockets, but there were almost none. Yeah? Hamas in September of 2008 offered to recognize Israel in the context of a two-state solution. Okay? Would they have actually recognized Israel? It's hard to say. It wasn't an offer Israel was prepared to take up and follow through. So, in looking at Hamas, I think it's important to recognize that it's a terrorist organization that some folks support for religious reasons, that some folks support for anti-Israel reasons, that some folks support because they just aren't the other folks, right? That engage a number of layers of activity, right? Some of which involve terrorism against citizens, some of which involve social services, and some of which involve a political component. Okay? And if we to see it in its complexity, I think, is to understand why it enjoys some support and yet ambivalence within the Palestinian community.
On a clear distinction between fundamentalism and extremism. Okay. I would not, from my standpoint teaching religion, refer to them as a fundamentalist group. They're an extremist group, political group, and as a result, they're terrorists. Their extreme views of the Quran and other teachings are, much like other groups as far as that's concerned. Culturally, and this is not correct in any way, it's just, this is not a group that has the correct reading of a document. This is a group that takes an extreme right-wing look at the document to the standpoint of for their ends, etc., not necessarily for specific religious purposes. Culturally speaking, I forget your wife's name. If you notice, something culturally was said differently. Todd referred to the first Intifada as being in what year?
Beginning 1987.
And what did you refer to it as?
1948.
48, okay? This is a very good point of discussion. For the people that were displaced, the population, they see 1948 as this first surge, you might say, this first problem. So politically, we're talking, and socially, incredibly complex issues here that aren't as simple as they seem. Could you answer the question exactly how sincere was Hamas's offer to Israel to, as you put it, recognize them?
Right, but
As what?
Recognize them as a state in the context of the two-state solution. How sincere was it? Israel never gave us a chance to find out. Right?
Okay.
Oh, sorry. President.
If I could comment, it is almost unthinkable to me that everybody in Hamas believed in the offer made by Hamas's organization. Maybe almost as unthinkable that nobody did. There has to have been somebody who was sincere, and there cannot have been everybody who was sincere. And sincerity lies in the hearts of individuals rather than in organizations.